station, this is CNN. How do you hear me?
CNN, this is station. We've got you loud and clear, John.
Hey guys, just wanted to ask you right off the bat, how are things going up there now that you've got the six of you all together? Makes things a little bit easier?
Well, it makes it easier to get a lot more done. That's for one thing, and it's awful nice to have the company. We have been training together, actually all six of us, for quite a while, for the last several years, and it's good to have a full team again. We've been for about 3 months with just half strength on board space station, so things are humming along pretty well now.
Neither of you guys can answer these questions. So much has been made of the fact that with six of you up there now, all the time, hopefully, that it'll be a lot easier to get science done, a lot easier to hopefully come up with some groundbreaking science. That really is the thrust of the space station right now, and isn't that clear that down the road, you're going to be hoping that these are the kinds of things that come out of space station?
The purposes of space station are many, and what you're talking about is the utilization of space station, and I like to break it down into two categories. One is scientific research, which you are well aware of, and most people are. There's a second category that I like to call engineering research. And this is working out details of engineering that maybe we don't quite know everything there is about building a piece of equipment. And one example of that is our regenerative life support system, which I fondly call the coffee machine, where we take our urine that comes in from our toilet and run it through a machine that goes makes grinding noises, and then out comes a bag of coffee on the other side. And so it turns yesterday's coffee into today's coffee. And this is an amazing piece of equipment. And we're in the process of figuring out how to make this robust and function in a way that when we go to Mars or when we go elsewhere beyond low Earth orbit, we can count on having a regenerative life support system that works. And that's an example of engineering research. And we spend a lot of our time doing engineering research on the systems and the details of space station, as well as the scientific research.
You just mentioned going to Mars, and I was out in Houston right before the holidays and spoke with one of your colleagues and a couple of medical doctors out there. I know one of the big issues now that they are saying is maybe the single biggest issue they have to resolve before going to Mars is this eye issue that's come up with a little bit of deterioration and then the change in the actual shape of the eye. You guys know it as well better than I do. First off, how are your eyes? And second of all, you are up there doing some studies right now on that, correct?
Yeah, you bet. I think it's potentially a threat. The thing that we're doing right now is we're actually quantitatively measuring a lot of the parameters. We're able to, with ultrasound, image the back of the eye, image the optic nerve, and we in fact did that for all of ourselves over the last week or two. We can also, through tonometry, measure the actual pressure in the eye, and that's a key thing. And then we can also, with a panoptic sensor, get very, very detailed, high-resolution imagery of the retina of the eye. And the kinds of problems that have happened in a fairly small subsection of the people that have flown here before seem to be isolated. Some people have it, many people don't have any at all. I think we came through and our eyes look very good. But I think the data that we get right now will be really important to help the scientists on the ground try to figure out exactly what's going on and how to mitigate it.
I have to ask you, but one of the primary reasons we were doing this was in advance of the launch of SpaceX, which is going to be an incredible feat for a commercial company. Now, of course, it's delayed, and my understanding is it could be a lengthy delay. That's still got to be a bit disappointing to you guys. I know you did a lot of practicing on grappling SpaceX, the Dragon, and when it gets there, it has to be a bit disappointing, though. But obviously, you want to make sure they get it right.
Now, I suppose on a personal level, it's maybe just a little bit disappointing. We've got a great consolation prize in the fact that we get to live and work here on board Space Station. So there's an awful lot of good, and if there's a little disappointment like that, it's pretty small. Space flight is tough. It's really, really hard, and to to think that anybody can just roll into this and very quickly field a system that's going to be able to be ready to go on the first day planned and be absolutely reliable is a little bit unrealistic. And this is the nature of spaceflight. You basically are going to have to design and test and probably redesign, and that's how Space Station was built. That's how all the spacecraft that have been here and have been in other places have been built, and it's always going to be tough, but I think it's going to be absolutely worthwhile despite the difficulties.
I was going to say that exactly what you just said is that it is just proves how difficult space flight is, particularly not just getting up and flying around, but when you've got to go someplace and rendezvous and then grapple. That's a whole new ball game.
Well, one of the unique things about SpaceX is it flies up like HTV and just gets close to Space Station, and then we kind of lasso it with the robotic arm and bring it in the last 10 meters and berth it to one of our docking ports. And this is a pretty sporting thing, particularly from space station operations from our viewpoint, and it's something that we spend a lot of time training for. Just like spacewalks, we spend a lot of time training for. Maybe we do a spacewalk, maybe we don't, but we're prepared for the situation.
I got a last couple quick questions for you. Space junk that's up there. It seems as if and maybe it's just me, but that you're more frequently having to either dodge it or, perhaps get into the escape vehicles. Is it disconcerting? Does something need to be done to address the growing amount of space junk that's up there? I understand there's a 3D movie out right now, or a new movie out, all about space junk that just came out, as a matter of fact.
I think it's a big threat, and it's something that we need to be really cognizant of in the future. Everybody that operates in space needs to be very careful about the spacecraft that they have here. We need to be very responsible about it. The amount of conjunctions that we're seeing right now and the debris avoidance maneuvers that we end up commanding on Space Station to avoid things is probably partly a reflection on the increase in the amount of debris that's out there, but it's probably also a little bit of a reflection in our ability, or an increase in our ability to actually see it. But still, there's an awful lot of material that's up here that falls below the threshold of what radars can actually detect. So to a certain degree, you're operating kind of in the field of big sky, small airplane mode, if you were to use an aviator's parlance. So I think it's really, really critical that we get the capability to monitor as best we can debris in orbit, that we basically design vehicles that when they reach the end of their life either are deorbited and are designed with that capability, or are reboosted, deorbited upwards, for example. And we always have got to be ready in the unlikely but potentially catastrophic event that if we were to have a debris strike, we have to be able to be in a position where we can protect the space station and ourselves.
I'm running out of time. 50th anniversary of John Glenn's flight coming up. Historic. You guys will be up there when it happens. How do you feel about where we've been, where we've come, where we need to go?
Oh gosh, I think we've been a long way since John Glenn orbited the Earth, and you think about his space flight was such a short flight in a capsule that he couldn't even unstrap from, and you look at what we're doing now, and it's just amazing in terms of the orbital operations that are going on now with Space Station and the numbers of people that are flying in space. And where it's going to go in the future, who knows? All I could say is stay tuned.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time. This is John Zarrella with CNN, and wrapping it up. Back to Houston.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the CNN portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from the Associated Press.
Station, this is the Associated Press. How do you hear me?
Associated Press is an International Space Station. Welcome aboard, Marcia. We've got you loud and clear.
Well, good morning, Commander Burbank, Dr. Pettit. Greetings from the Kennedy Space Center on a beautiful morning. I'd like to start off a little bit with SpaceX. Do you have any insight into when the launch might be and whether either of you will still be on board when that happens?
I have not heard dates. I know that there have been some issues that have come up in testing. As much as we would personally enjoy the opportunity to actually get a chance to grapple and birth SpaceX, if that's not to be during our mission, then that's okay. We've got plenty of other things to occupy us and very rewarding things as well. But they'll fly when they're ready, and they'll fly when they need to. And whoever's here, whether it's us or the next crew, that crew is going to be ready as well.
Well, could you put the flight in perspective for me, how you see its place in space history, the big picture of when it does happen?
It's always been governments, it's always been nations that have launched payloads into space. And so this will be one step in the long road to human expansion off of the planet into low Earth orbit and beyond.
And how tricky will it be to snare the capsule? Is that something that's complicated or rather straightforward, just as if you were going to grab any satellite?
I think at first order, it's a fairly straightforward operation. It's something that we can train pretty well, we can simulate very well, and in fact, we now have the capability on board Space Station using a couple different computers that we can actually replicate the simulators that we use on the ground, and actually right up until the day of a grapple, a track and capture we'd call it, we can actually practice that and go through at least the piloting skills of how that works. As far as the crew coordination between the people that are going to be prime flying the arm and the person that's going to help them, that's something that we also get an awful lot of time practicing leading up to it. That's not to say that any vehicle that comes up here, there's a lot of challenges both on the design side, on the ground control side, as well as on board. So it is a challenging kind of an operation from an overall global choreography standpoint, but it's something that's absolutely doable, and it'll be great to see when we finally do it. And the other beautiful thing about SpaceX is the ability to return cargo from Space Station. So with the loss of Space Shuttle, we haven't been able to do that, and we've got lots of samples that that are the result of the scientific research that we really need to get back to planet Earth. And having the ability to return a vehicle like SpaceX is going to be key down the road.
Tell me, Commander Burbank, are you feeling the absence of the space shuttles in terms of cargo up mass, back and down? I'm just wondering if you notice any kind of extra collection on board of stuff that should be going down, or garbage, or even just the coming and going of a regular ship like that.
Well, there's been some impact, certainly, and it would be disingenuous to say otherwise. The shuttle did all the heavy lifting, both literally and figuratively, for Space Station, and it was the unique capability we needed to bring up big, heavy modules, to assemble them using the shuttle's robotic arm in conjunction with the station robotic arm, to support EVAs that are based off the shuttle and even off the station. It's not just the up mass, down mass that we lost with the shuttle, but speaking to that specific question, it has been a little bit more challenging, and it's been made more so by the loss of Progress 44P this past summer. But with that said, we're just now ready to undock Progress 45P here in a couple of days, and we managed to, amazingly, I don't know how we did it, but with the help of the Russian specialists and our Russian crews and all of us hunting down every little bit of trash that we could find on station, stow away almost everything that we had that needed to go back, that we needed to at least get rid of to make room for the operations you do on board. So I think we're getting by okay, but we need to have as much up mass and down mass capability as we can to support space station operations at the level we need it.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you both about the golden anniversary next month of John Glenn's first flight. I heard you discussing the other day, Dr. Pettit, how Mr. Glenn inspired you to become an astronaut, and I'd like you to elaborate on that a little more, please, and you too, Commander Burbank. How has John Glenn's first flight shaped both of your lives? I know you were just a babe there, Commander Burbank, when that flight happened, but still, it must have shaped you in some way as a professional astronaut.
Well, one thing that John Glenn's flight did was just show that this was reality, that spaceflight moved from science fiction to science fact. And there's one thing to dream as a little kid and as an adult. It's another thing to have real possibilities that you can actually plan and achieve. And one of the seminal things that John Glenn's flight did was show that space flight with humans is possible, and that we have a program that is ongoing, so that a kid growing up and being in school could say, I want to study hard and do math and science and take all the hard courses, so that when I pop out of school on the other end, I can become an astronaut.
And I guess my answer to that would be all those early missions, and the one mission that stands out most in my mind was just before my 8th birthday, was the Apollo 11 moon landing, and that was a huge impact to me personally. And all my life I've been, I guess, what I'd call a space geek, or an amateur astronomer, somebody always interested in all things space. But it wasn't until I was already flying helicopters in the Coast Guard for quite a few years, and that it ever occurred to me to actually that this was something I could do. Even as an 8-year-old or a 10 or 12-year-old, I think I was maybe too much of a realist to think that becoming an astronaut was a possibility for me, which is probably a good lesson for a lot of kids right now. And I guess I would say that you have no idea what you're really capable of.
Dr. Pettit, I was hoping you could also talk a little bit more about those red ball jet shoes of yours and that little recording of John Glenn describing his flight. How old were you then? And do you remember, do you have any recollection of the day that John Glenn became the first American in orbit?
You know, I probably remember the little record in the red ball jets more than John Glenn's actual launch. And I can't really remember how old I was. I could look at the dates and do the math. But what really burned an image in my mind were the pictures that would show up in Life magazine. And this gets back to the importance of sharing the experience with everyone and talking to people like you, Marcia, that take interviews from people like us and then go out and share them with the rest of the world. Because if it isn't for those kinds of outlets, there'd be a whole host of kids that wouldn't even know what's going on in the space program.
And one more question along this line, if I might. I'm assuming you've both met John Glenn. Have you both met him sometime in the past?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, thank you. Dr. Pettit, you had another interesting comment the other day when you said that you would be willing to immigrate to space, and I've been covering this for a long time and never heard anyone go so far off that limb before. And what is it about space that would prompt you to want to stay there forever, assuming you had your family with you, and to never come back to Earth?
Well, you know, I came to this conclusion during Expedition 6 back in 2002, 2003, and I talked about it then. I think I even wrote an essay about it, which then were called journals, but now we call them blogs. And it just, there's something that sings in my heart when I'm in space, and it's got to be the same kind of feeling that people had in the 15th and 16th and 17th centuries when they decided to immigrate to the New World, and they knew they were going to load up their families and get on a ship and go off and never see the continental Europe again, and they were okay with that. I'm not sure about the families that were dragged along, but they may not have had a choice back then. And that's how I feel inside. Is if we had the technology so that you knew you could immigrate into space and continue to live a normal life, I would pack up everything I have on Earth, including my family, and move away and never come back.
Well, do you think that's going to happen in your lifetime, if not you, another astronaut and their family? I mean, is this how far into the future do you see that? And when you were that boy wanting those Red Ball Jet shoes, did you think that 50 years, 40 years hence, which would be today, that there would be people living in space, not just on a station, but actually really, truly being there forever?
I think when I was a little kid, those kind of philosophical arguments were way above me, and I was probably more concerned about whether the little red sticker on the side of my Red Ball Jets would fall off like they did on the previous pair. But in terms of where will we be in another 50 years, my crystal ball doesn't see that far. I do think that these kinds of concepts of the future are built by people starting off saying, we want to make that happen. And so if we want to be able to basically colonize places outside of Earth, it's something that we as human beings, we as Americans need to say, we want to make that happen, and then we just roll up our sleeves and we do it. And it'll take 20, 25, 30 years of hard work to do it, but we've got to have a plan, we've got to be motivated, and we just have to start in and work on it, and that's how we'll make this future.
Well, I'd like to say thank you to both, and good luck and Godspeed on your journeys.
Thanks very much, Marcia. You take care.
The station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
And thank you, CNN and Associated Press. Station, we're now resuming operational audio communications.